My son was only 9 years old. He couldn't hear the Christmas carols or the clinking glasses around him, but he saw everything. That night, in the middle of his grandfather's 70th birthday celebration, he stood up in his small suit, walked to the head of the table, and placed a tiny red-wrapped box right in front of his aunt. Everyone froze. Forks hovered in the air. The music seemed to vanish. He signed a few words with his hands, and his cousin translated out loud. "Grandma told me to give this to you if you ever tried to make me disappear again." The entire room fell silent. His aunt's smile twitched. His grandfather's eyes filled with tears. And every single person leaned forward, waiting for the truth that was about to break this family apart. Inside that little box was a secret my late mother-in-law had hidden away. A secret about inheritance, about loyalty, and about who truly belonged. And here's the part no one expected. It wasn't me, the grown woman who finally stood up to my husband's powerful sister. It wasn't my husband either. It was our quiet boy, our son who couldn't even hear the noise of the party, but carried the loudest truth in the room. Why did a 9-year-old child have to be the one to remind adults what family really means? And what did his grandmother leave behind that was so powerful it made a woman scream when she opened it? These are not stories of strangers. They are stories of people we call family, the very people who should love us the most, yet sometimes cause the deepest wounds. And if you've ever felt overlooked, invisible, or treated as less by your own blood, then you already know how heavy that silence feels. Before we continue, take a second to subscribe to this channel. That way, whenever life gets busy, you can always come back to these stories. Stories that remind us we're not alone. Stories that carry lessons about betrayal, heartbreak, and healing. Because sometimes, when family breaks, the smallest voices are the ones that teach us the biggest truths. So, what was really inside that red box, and why did it leave a mark on every single person in that room? Stay with me, because what happened next changed not just one dinner, but the future of an entire family. When my son Eli was born, the world was already stacked against him. He couldn't hear the lullabies I sang or the bedtime stories whispered into the dark, but he had the brightest eyes full of curiosity, as if he were determined to catch every detail that sound would never give him. At first, the family adored him. New babies always draw smiles, don't they? He was passed around from arm to arm, kissed on the forehead, photographed under the Christmas tree. For a moment, I thought maybe his deafness wouldn't matter, that love would simply rise above it. But over time, small things began to reveal the truth. They didn't arrive all at once. They crept in slowly, disguised as accidents or oversights, like the birthday parties. When his cousins opened remote control cars, action figures, shiny toys wrapped with ribbons, Eli was given a plain notebook, a cheap one, the kind you'd buy in bulk for school supplies. He clutched it politely, even smiled, but I saw the difference, and so did he. Or the family photos. They would gather everyone on the staircase, position them by height coordinate outfits. Someone always seemed to forget to call Eli until after the shot was taken. There he would be running in with his shirt tucked wrong, his little face confused. In the photo albums, he looked like a guest who happened to wander into someone else's memory. And the dinners. Oh, the dinners. His cousins would chatter loudly around the table, jokes bouncing back and forth, laughter echoing off the walls. Eli, unable to follow, sat quietly, fork in hand, eyes darting from face to face. No one slowed down for him. No one thought to translate. They just carried on as if his silence meant he wasn't really there. I tried to brush it off. I told myself families are busy, distracted, not always thoughtful. I told Eli, they love you, sweetheart. They're just forgetful. But how many times can you call cruelty forgetfulness before it becomes something else? And here's the cruelest twist of all: the only person who ever truly saw him, who bent down, looked him in the eyes, and signed with her hands, was his grandmother, my mother-in-law. The woman we would later discover had left behind that red box. She was the one who secretly took a night class in American Sign Language just so Eli would never feel alone in her house. She was the one who signed "I love you" with crooked fingers that made Eli giggle. And yet, after she passed, the rest of the family seemed to decide that connection had died with her. I'll never forget the Thanksgiving when the truth hit me hardest. The cousins wore matching flannel pajamas for the traditional group photo. Eli sat at the edge of the couch in his regular clothes. No one had ordered a set in his size. He tugged at his sleeves and asked me in signs, did they forget me again? What would you have said? That it was just a mistake? That the missing pajamas didn't mean he was missing too? And then there was the cake. During one cousin's birthday, the others got slices with tall candles and extra frosting piled high. Eli was handed the end piece, dry, undecorated, no candle. He blew out nothing at all while the rest of the kids clapped for each other's wishes. He didn't cry. He didn't even frown. He just grew quieter. And let me tell you, sometimes the silence of a child hurts more than any scream. Now, I don't want you to think Eli was always somber. He had his own way of bringing light, even in the shadows. Once during a family gathering, he started signing nonsense, mixing real signs with silly ones. His uncle thought Eli had just asked for chicken-wearing sunglasses. The whole table burst into laughter. Even Eli laughed so hard he nearly fell off his chair. But while everyone was laughing at the joke, I saw something deeper. He was reminding them he existed, that he could still make them laugh if they only paid attention. But those moments were rare. Most of the time, he was fading into the background as if his quietness made him less worthy of notice. And I began to wonder, how many times can a child be left out before he stops expecting to be included? How many little cuts does it take before the wound becomes permanent? I wish I had fought harder in those early years. I wish I had stood up at the table, demanded that someone translate, that someone hand him the same gift, the same slice of cake. But I stayed quiet, hoping not to make waves. The truth is, silence doesn't protect children. It teaches them to accept being invisible. And Eli was learning that lesson far too well. But here's the irony. While most of the family overlooked him, he was the one paying the closest attention. He noticed every pause, every sigh, every sideways glance. He noticed when the adults whispered after funerals, when they locked cabinets, when certain envelopes disappeared. He may not have heard their words, but he saw everything. And that, in the end, is what would change everything for us. Because while the rest of the family thought they could write him out of the picture, Eli was quietly collecting the truth. And one day soon, he would hold that truth in his small hands in the form of a box he wasn't supposed to have. After my mother-in-law passed, the house felt different. Her laugh no longer echoed in the hallway. The scent of her lavender lotion faded from the cushions. But more than that, there was a silence that wasn't Eli's, but the family's. During the last weeks of her life, she had taken my hand in the hospital and whispered something I didn't fully understand. Her voice was frail, a thread barely holding. She said, "In the safe. There's something for Eli. Don't let anyone take it." At the time, I nodded, but grief was heavy. I thought maybe it was a keepsake, a trinket, a photo. I didn't realize the weight of her words until later. You see, my sister-in-law, Vivian, the eldest, the organizer, the one who always spoke loudest, took control the moment the funeral ended. She called the family together, keys jingling in her hand, and said, "Mother wanted me to handle the estate. I'll keep things in order." And just like that, the safe in my mother-in-law's study, where she kept documents, jewelry, family papers, was suddenly locked with a new code. Vivian smiled as she tapped the keypad, then pulled the door shut with a metallic click. No one questioned her. Why would they? She had always been in charge. But I remembered those whispered words. Don't let anyone take it. Weeks passed and small changes surfaced. Jewelry pieces went missing from the display cabinet. The family Bible vanished. And when I asked about the safe, Vivian laughed. Nothing in there but old papers. Useless clutter. But clutter doesn't keep a woman awake at night, guarding it like a dragon over gold. And here's where the story takes a strange turn. One chilly evening, our gardener, Mr. Whitman, stopped me by the gate. He was in his 70s, a man who'd worked the yard for decades, his skin weathered like bark. He tugged his cap, cleared his throat, and said, "Ma'am, I don't mean to pry, but I saw something odd last week." "What do you mean?" I asked. Well, he started slowly, like every word was being measured. I was trimming the hedges out back, and I saw Miss Vivian come out late at night. She had a stack of folders tied with string. She put them in the trunk of her car, looked mighty nervous, didn't see me in the dark. My stomach dropped. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "I've been gardening longer than she's been bossing, and I know the look of someone sneaking around. She didn't want nobody to see." Now, Mr. Whitman had a habit of telling stories that wandered. He once took 20 minutes to explain how a squirrel had stolen his sandwich. But beneath the rambling, his eyes were sharp. He knew what he'd seen. I pressed him. "What kind of folders?" He scratched his chin. "Couldn't say for sure, but heavy ones. Legal maybe. Thick paper, the kind your mother-in-law always tucked away in that safe." And there, it was the first real sign that Vivian was hiding something. But here's the thing, secrets don't stay buried forever, especially not when a child is watching. Eli, though deaf, noticed the changes in the house too. He tugged my sleeve one morning and signed, "Where's Grandma's picture?" He pointed to the mantel where her wedding photo used to sit. Gone. Another piece vanished under Vivian's management. I reassured him, though my chest ached. "We'll find it, sweetheart." But the truth was, I wasn't sure we ever would. That night, lying awake, I replayed my mother-in-law's words. "In the safe. Don't let anyone take it." What could be so important that she feared even her own daughter would destroy it? An old photo album, a letter A, Will. The questions clawed at me, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized something chilling. Vivian didn't just want control, she wanted erasure. She wanted to decide who belonged and who didn't. And if there was proof in that safe that Eli belonged, then of course, she would want it gone. Have you ever felt the moment when suspicion hardens into certainty? It's like stepping onto ice that suddenly cracks beneath your feet. You know the truth is about to break through whether you're ready or not. And Eli, quiet observant, Eli was already preparing himself for the day that crack split wide open. Because while the rest of us hesitated, he understood one thing. What people try hardest to hide often tells you who they really are. And soon, that hidden truth would no longer stay locked in a safe. After the funeral, the house grew heavy with dust and silence. My father-in-law, Harold, moved through it like a ghost, shoulders bent, as though every step weighed 100 pounds. He had always been the quiet one, letting his wife hold the family together with her voice, her laughter, her will. Without her, he looked unfinished. But grief has a way of loosening secrets. One late afternoon, while sorting through closets, Harold found an envelope tucked inside his wife's old cardigan. The sweater still carried her perfume, lavender and vanilla, and as he pressed it to his face, something slipped to the floor. It was thick-sealed and labeled in her handwriting, "For Eli's eyes only." Harold sat on the edge of the bed, hands trembling. He turned the envelope over and over as if it might vanish if he let go. Inside was a small USB drive and a folded note. On the outside of the note was scrawled, "Password, the nickname only Eli knows." Harold stared at it, heart thundering. His wife had planned this. She had known somehow that Eli would need proof, that words wouldn't be enough. But Harold was a man of hesitation. He had lived his whole life avoiding conflict, smoothing edges, keeping peace at any cost. He feared opening that note, feared what truths it might unleash. So he slipped the envelope into the back of his desk drawer, locking it away like a man hiding from his own conscience. For weeks it stayed there. Harold would sit at his desk in the evenings, pouring himself whiskey, staring at the drawer. Sometimes he'd reach for the key, then stop. What if opening it meant tearing the family apart? What if it meant facing Vivian's wrath? He had watched his daughter grow sharper with age, wielding control like a weapon. He wasn't sure he had the strength to confront her, and yet he couldn't shake his wife's voice. For Eli. For Eli. One evening, curiosity pushed him too far. He slid the USB into his laptop. The screen flickered to life, demanding the password. Harold frowned, the nickname only Eli knows. Now Harold wasn't exactly a tech-savvy man. To him, computers were foreign creatures, blinking and beeping without reason. He typed in Buddy. Wrong. He tried Pumpkin. Wrong again. He muttered under his breath, Dang thing, and typed Champ. Locked. The laptop chimed angrily, warning him too many failed attempts would freeze the drive. Frustrated, he smacked the side of the screen, which of course did nothing. In his clumsy attempt to back out, he somehow opened a random video on YouTube, cats leaping into boxes while silly music played. Harold groaned, but Eli, watching from the corner, burst into silent laughter. He signed Grandpa Doesn't Know Computers. For the first time in weeks, Harold laughed too. But that laughter didn't erase the truth. There was something inside that USB his wife had wanted Eli to see, something worth protecting. Harold sat Eli on his lap and held the small drive in his hand. This, he said softly, is yours. Someday, when the time is right, you'll know what to do with it. Eli looked at the drive with wide eyes, then touched his grandfather's chest and signed Secret. Harold nodded. Yes, little man, a secret, but not forever. One day it will speak louder than anything Vivian can say. And in that moment, Harold made a silent promise. He had failed to protect his wife in her final days. He had failed to stand up to his daughter's cruelty. But he would not fail Eli. Still, the question lingered. What kind of truth could be so powerful it had to be hidden in a password-protected file? A confession, a letter A will rewritten. Whatever it was, Harold knew one thing. It was the reason his wife had died with a burden in her eyes. And soon, whether he was ready or not, that burden would pass to Eli. Because secrets don't stay in drawers forever. Thanksgiving is supposed to be the holiday of belonging. A long table, too many side dishes, children running in and out of rooms, laughter spilling through every doorway. At least that's how it looked from the outside. But for Eli, Thanksgiving was another reminder that he didn't quite fit. The cousins had been given matching flannel pajamas, red and black checkered, so they could all line up for the annual family photo. Eli, of course, hadn't been included in the order. He wore his regular sweatshirt sleeves too long, sitting at the edge of the couch. In the photograph, he looked less like a cousin and more like a neighbor who had wandered in by mistake. Later, when the kids gathered around the big table, Vivian made sure to pull out the card table from the garage. "The kids can eat here," she announced, setting up folding chairs. Everyone cheered except Eli, because when the plates were passed out, no one sat beside him. His cousins bunched together on one side, chattering, while Eli sat alone at the corner, hands folded, fork waiting. I walked past holding a tray of rolls, and my heart twisted. My son looked like a guest in his own family. He tried to join in. He tapped his cousin's shoulder, signed something about wanting mashed potatoes. But without Grandma there to translate, his signs fell into the void. His cousin shrugged, laughed nervously, and turned back to the others. Eli's hands lowered slowly to his lap. But children have resilience that adults often forget. Eli picked up a crayon from the craft table and began to draw. By the end of the meal, he had sketched a family portrait, Grandpa, Harold, his cousins, even the family dog. Everyone was there except Vivian. In the corner of the page where she should have been, there was nothing but blank space. When I asked him quietly why he left her out, he signed simply, "She's not here." It was both innocent and devastating. Because of course, she was there, loud, commanding, carving the turkey like a queen serving her court. But to Eli, she wasn't. She had never really been present for him. And children, with their simple clarity, sometimes see truths we adults spend years avoiding. The moment wasn't all heavy, though. In his own way, Eli found humor even in isolation. At one point, he tried to order more turkey using signs. He tapped his chest, then flapped his arms like wings. His uncle squinted, misread the gesture, and thought Eli meant bathroom. Within seconds, half the table was laughing, imagining the poor boy flapping toward the restroom. Eli rolled his eyes, then grinned, signing exaggerated nonsense just to keep the laughter going. For a few moments, the ice cracked. People laughed with him, not at him. And Eli, clever as always, had reminded everyone he was still part of the room, if only they chose to see him. But as the night wore on, the laughter faded and the pattern returned. Conversations flew over his head, secrets whispered in corners, decisions made without him. I caught him watching, not sulking, just observing. His eyes followed every gesture, every glance. He saw the way Vivian leaned in to whisper to Harold how she touched his arm, and he looked away. He saw the way papers were shuffled quickly off the sideboard when guests arrived. He may not have heard the words, but he noticed everything. And it struck me while the family treated him like a guest, Eli was quietly becoming something else. He was becoming a witness. Because here's the truth, most adults forget children don't need sound to recognize when they're being excluded. They feel it, they carry it, and sometimes they remember it better than we do. That Thanksgiving, I tucked Eli into bed later than usual. He handed me the drawing he'd made, pointing again to the empty space where Vivian should have been. Then he signed, "Not family." What do you say to that? Do you lie? Tell him everyone is family, even the ones who never claim him? Or do you admit the darker truth that sometimes the people with the loudest voices at the table are the very ones who leave you out of it? I kissed his forehead and told him, "You are family. You always will be." But as I turned out the light, my chest ached with a question I couldn't shake. How many more holidays would he spend as a guest before the truth finally forced its way to the center of the table? It was a quiet evening when Harold finally pulled Eli onto his lap, his hand shaking as he held up the small USB drive. The light from the lamp glinted off its plastic surface like it was some sacred relic. "This," Harold said slowly, "was left for you by Grandma. She wanted you to have it when the time was right." Eli's eyes widened. He touched the USB with careful fingers, then signed "Secret." "Yes," Harold whispered, "but not just a secret, a truth." The truth waited inside that tiny device locked behind a password that only Eli would know, the nickname Grandma used for him when no one else was around Starling. Harold slid the USB into his laptop. The screen lit up, demanding the password. Eli leaned forward, his small hands moving with certainty, spelling the letters out as Harold typed. The screen blinked. A folder opened, and there she was. Grandma's face filled the screen, her voice soft but clear. The video must have been recorded in her final months, her hair thinner, her cheeks pale. But her eyes, they burned with the same fire, Eli remembered. "If you're watching this," she began, "then I am no longer here, and that means Eli needs my voice now more than ever." Eli's hands flew to his mouth. He couldn't hear her words, but the subtitles she had painstakingly typed appeared at the bottom of the screen. She had thought of everything. She continued, "I know some of you don't see Eli as one of us. You whisper behind his back. You leave him out of pictures, out of gifts, out of love. But let me tell you this, he is my grandson. My heart doesn't need him to hear my words to know he belongs. And if anyone tries to erase him from this family, let this message be his shield." The room was silent. Eli's shoulders trembled. Grandma leaned closer to the camera. "I've made arrangements. A portion of what I leave behind is for Eli, his education, his future. No one is to touch it. No one. And if this message is ever questioned, then remember, I am speaking from beyond the grave to say what I never want forgotten. Love is not measured in blood, but in choice." Her image flickered, then froze. Eli turned to Harold, his eyes wide as if asking, "Did you hear her? Did everyone hear her?" But not everyone wanted to. Because just as Harold began to replay the video, Vivian stormed into the room. Her eyes darted to the laptop, then to the USB in Harold's trembling hand. "What are you doing?" she snapped. "Your mother left this for Eli," Harold said, his voice steadier than usual. Vivian's smile curled sharp as glass. That's nothing. A fake. Probably something you found online. Anyone can make a video these days." Eli's fists clenched. He shook his head furiously, signing "No Grandma." Harold slammed the laptop shut before Vivian could reach it. "Enough," he said. "This is her voice." "I know it." Vivian sneered. "And what good will her voice do you now? She's gone. And this," she pointed at the laptop, "will not change how this family works." For a moment, the room vibrated with tension. Vivian stood like a wall, determined to silence even the memory of her mother. But Eli sat straighter, the USB clutched in his small hand like a sword. And then, in one of those absurd moments life gives you, Harold tried to open the laptop again, fumbling with the keys. Instead of the video, he somehow launched a YouTube clip of a cat falling into a fish tank. The splash filled the screen, and Harold cursed under his breath. Eli broke into silent laughter, shaking his shoulders so hard the chair rattled. Even in that heavy moment, the boy managed to find joy. But beneath the laughter, the weight of Grandma's words remained. A shield, a truth, a warning. Vivian left the room muttering about nonsense and childish games, but Harold knew better. He had seen the fear flicker across her face when the video played. And fear, he realized, only comes when someone has something to lose. That night, as Eli drifted to sleep, clutching the USB in his palm, Harold sat at the edge of his bed. He whispered words the boy couldn't hear, but somehow understood. "She gave you the power, Eli. One day you'll use it. And when you do, no one will be able to deny you again." But the question lingered like a shadow at the door. What would happen when that truth was finally shown in front of everyone? Would it set Eli free or break the family beyond repair? The banquet hall glowed with golden lights. Chandeliers sparkled above, tables were dressed in white linen, and waiters moved gracefully between the crowd. This was Harold's 70th birthday, the kind of milestone that demanded grandeur. Guests arrived in press suits and glittering dresses, their voices rising in waves of laughter. But beneath the glitter tension simmered, because not everyone had come for celebration. Some came for appearances, some came for approval. And one boy, my son Eli, came with a secret clutched in his pocket. He wore his best suit, the one he said made him look like a little lawyer. His hair was combed neatly, his shoes polished until they reflected the light. But it wasn't the suit that made him stand taller that night. It was the USB in his pocket, the one his grandmother had left. Dinner began as usual. Toasts were made. Glasses clinked. Vivian stood proudly near her father, smiling at the guests as if she were queen of the evening. Her voice boomed, thanking everyone for coming, praising Harold for his wisdom, his strength, his role as patriarch. But Eli wasn't listening. His eyes scanned the room, watching for the moment when silence would fall. It came after dessert. A hush swept across the room as the birthday cake, layered with chocolate and gold accents, was wheeled in. Candles flickered, music played, and everyone leaned in to sing. Harold smiled, tears in his eyes. And then Eli rose. He walked to the head of the table, his small figure suddenly commanding the room. He placed the USB, wrapped now in a piece of red ribbon, right in front of Vivian. His cousin translated his signs aloud, voice trembling. "Grandma told me to give this to you if you ever tried to make me disappear again." The room froze. Forks hovered. Candles flickered. Vivian's smile faltered. "What is this nonsense?" she scoffed. Harold stood, voice firmer than anyone expected. "Play it." Vivian tried to protest, but the crowd leaned forward, curiosity burning. A laptop was brought to the table, the USB slid in. Eli whispered the password into Harold's ear, and the folder opened. And there she was. Grandma's face appeared on the screen. The room gasped. A few guests even crossed themselves as if seeing a ghost. Her voice filled the speakers, fragile but determined. "If you're watching this," she began, "then I am gone. But my words must remain. This is for Eli and for all of you who ever doubted him." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Eli sat tall eyes fixed on the screen. "My grandson Eli may not hear your voices, but he hears more than you realize. He feels your neglect. He notices your whispers. And I will not let his silence be mistaken for weakness." She paused, her eyes burning into the camera. "A portion of what I leave behind is for Eli's education, for his future. That cannot be touched. And if any of you think otherwise, then remember, you are not just stealing from a child, you are betraying me." The words struck like thunder. The air in the hall shifted. People exchanged glances, some ashamed, others shocked. One of the uncles, clearly nervous, took a sip of his drink and immediately choked on an olive. He coughed so violently his chair rattled, and for a brief moment the tension cracked into awkward laughter. Even Eli covered his mouth shoulders, shaking with a silent giggle. But as the coughing subsided, silence reclaimed the room. On the screen, Grandma leaned forward, voice steady. "Eli belongs. He always has. If you cannot accept him as your own, then you do not deserve the name of family. Blood may bind us, but love defines us. And my love will always claim him." The video ended. The laptop screen went black. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The weight of her words pressed down like a heavy blanket. Harold's hand trembled as he reached for Eli's shoulder, steadying both himself and the boy. Eli looked around the table. His chest rose and fell, quickly, his eyes wide, but his chin lifted high. In that moment, he was no longer the quiet boy sitting at the kids' table. He was the one holding the room. Vivian's face twisted pale and furious. She forced a laugh that rang hollow. "A convenient trick," she said, voice sharp. "Anyone can fake a video these days. You think this proves anything?" The crowd stirred uneasily. Doubt flickered, but so did curiosity. No one spoke. All eyes turned back to Harold. And for the first time in years, he didn't stay silent. He looked directly at his daughter and said, "It proves everything." The silence after those words was deafening, because everyone knew this wasn't just a video. It was a woman's last will, her last truth, and it had just been laid bare in front of everyone she left behind. But what happens when the truth is spoken in a room full of people who don't want to hear it? Would they finally stand with Eli, or would Vivian fight harder than ever to bury him again? For a long moment after the video ended, the hall stayed silent. Only the faint crackle of candles and the hum of the chandelier filled the air. Eli sat tall in his chair, his small hands clenched on the table, the red ribbon from the USB still between his fingers. Then it began. Vivian pushed back her chair so suddenly it screeched against the polished floor. The sound made several guests jump. Her face was red, her lips trembling, her hands balled into fists. "This is outrageous," she spat. "A trick. A child's stunt. You think a recording proves anything? You think she would betray her own daughter like this?" Her voice rose sharp enough to slice the room in half. "This," she pointed at Eli, her finger shaking. "This boy is not truly ours. He is an outsider, and outsiders do not inherit what belongs to blood." Gasps rippled through the table. A few cousins looked down ashamed. Others shifted uncomfortably, not daring to meet Eli's eyes. But Harold stood. His chair creaked as he pushed himself up his shoulders, straightening with a strength no one expected. His voice, though soft, cut through the noise. "Enough, Vivian." She whirled on him. "Enough, Father, can't you see what's happening? This girl," she jabbed her finger toward me, "has poisoned you. She's turned you against your own family. Against me." Harold's eyes, tired but burning, didn't leave hers. "No one turned me. You did this yourself. The moment you decided a child's silence made him less." Vivian's mouth opened, but no sound came. Her chest rose and fell, breath ragged. For the first time, her control was slipping. Eli, watching it all, raised his small hands and signed slowly, "Calm down." His cousin translated aloud, and the room, tense frozen, cracked into nervous laughter. Even in the storm, the boy had found a way to remind everyone that fury was not power. Vivian's face twisted. "Calm down," she hissed. "You dare mock me, a child who can't even hear." "Stop!" Harold barked louder than anyone had ever heard him. His voice echoed against the walls. "You will not speak of him that way. Not in front of me. Not ever again." The hall stilled. For years, Harold had been the quiet one, letting his wife handle conflict, letting Vivian take control. But now, with his grandson at stake, the man had finally drawn a line. Vivian's eyes darted around the room, desperate for support. She looked to her siblings, her cousins, even the in-laws. But no one rose. No one came to her defense. The words of her mother, the video still fresh in their ears, hung heavy in the air. And so Vivian did what cornered people often do. She lashed out. "You're all blind," she snapped. "This is manipulation. This is not what Mother wanted. She would never leave her legacy to a boy who doesn't even carry her name." I felt Eli's small hand slide into mine under the table. His grip was firm, steady. For all her shouting, he was the calmest one in the room. Harold looked at his daughter, and his voice softened, though his words cut deeper than any shout. She carried Eli in her heart. That is all the name he ever needed. The silence that followed was heavier than her rage. Vivian's eyes glistened, though whether with tears or fury, no one could tell. She slammed her fist against the table, rattling glasses and silverware. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "Every one of you." She spun on her heel, her heels clicking like gunshots against the hardwood as she stormed out of the hall. The doors slammed behind her, shaking in their frame. But the echo of her fury couldn't drown out what had already been spoken. The truth was in the air now. The family had heard it. And while fear still lingered in their eyes, so did something else, recognition. Eli sat back in his chair, his face calm, his eyes steady. For once, he didn't look like a guest. He looked like someone who had finally taken his place at the table. But the question hung over us all heavy as the silence. Would the rest of the family choose to stand with him or retreat into Vivian's shadow once more? The banquet hall was still humming with the echoes of Vivian's fury when Harold reached for the laptop again. His hands trembled as he clicked the glow of the screen washing over his tired face. I think he said, voice steady, despite the weight in the room, "There's more." The cursor hovered over the USB folder. Beside the video was another file too, in fact. One labeled Will PDF, the other Letter Docs. The crowd leaned forward, breath held. Harold opened the first. The screen filled with scanned pages, the signature of Grandma at the bottom, the official stamp of the court. The true will. My heart stopped as I read the words, a specific portion set aside for Eli, designated for his education, his future. Clear, unmistakable. But then Harold clicked to the second page, and that's when the air shifted, because the signatures didn't match. "Wait," one cousin whispered. "That's not the same Will Vivian showed us after the funeral." Exactly. Vivian's version had omitted Eli entirely shifting the funds into an account marked for her own son. The deception was laid bare in black and white. Gasps rippled through the room. A few people muttered, others shook their heads. The shame, the betrayal, it hung thick in the air. And then Harold opened the second file. The letter. It was written in Grandma's shaky hand, the strokes uneven but determined. He began to read aloud. "To my family, if you're holding this letter, it means I am gone, and you are facing a choice. For years, I have watched some of you treat Eli as less as though his silence meant he did not belong. I cannot stop death, but I can leave behind the truth. Eli is my grandson, not by chance, not by blood alone, but by choice. He is to inherit not only my love, but the resources to build his life. Do not fail him. Do not erase him, because if you do, you erase me." The words caught in Harold's throat, his voice breaking, but he pressed on. "And to my daughter Vivian, if you are tempted to twist my will to take what is not yours, remember this, a child's place in this family is not yours to decide. And if Eli must be the one to reveal this letter, then know you have already failed as a sister, as an aunt, as a daughter." The hall fell into stunned silence. No one dared move. No one dared breathe. And then, because life has a cruel sense of humor, Harold tried to zoom in on the text, fumbling with the mouse. Instead of enlarging the words, he accidentally rotated the page sideways. The whole document turned 90 degrees. Hold on, he muttered, adjusting his glasses. But he couldn't fix it. So there sat a room full of relatives, craning their necks like confused owls trying to read a sideways letter. A nervous laugh bubbled up at one table. Even Eli shook his head, shoulders bouncing with silent giggles. The tension cracked, but only for a moment, because when Harold finally corrected the screen, the words stared back at us with undeniable weight. Vivian had lied. She had stolen. She had tried to erase a child's future for the sake of her own. I looked at Eli. His small hand rested over the keyboard, his eyes wide but steady. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't even surprised. It was as if he had always known the truth would surface, because secrets like this never stay hidden forever. The relatives began to murmur, voices rising. How could she? After everything Mother said, this is shameful. But shame alone doesn't heal wounds, and betrayal this deep doesn't disappear with whispers. I could feel the question rippling through the room, unspoken but heavy. Would the family finally stand up to Vivian's deceit, or would they once again look away and let silence bury the truth? The letter on the screen still glowed, its words carved into everyone's mind like a brand. No one dared look directly at Eli, but every eye flicked toward him, then away, as if the truth were too heavy to face head-on. Harold was the first to move. He placed both hands on the table, pushing himself to his feet. His frame, once stooped, seemed taller now, his shoulders squared under the weight of a decision that could no longer be delayed. "I've been silent too long," he began, voice low but resonant. The room hushed. "I let your mother carry this family's burdens. I let Vivian bark her orders. I let myself believe peace was more important than truth. But tonight, I will not stay silent." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then one of the aunt's hands, trembling, stood slowly. "He's right," she said softly. "Mother wanted Eli, and I won't dishonor her by pretending otherwise." A cousin rose next, pulling her chair back with a scrape. "I won't either." Vivian was gone, but her shadow still lingered. Those who hesitated looked toward the door she had stormed through, as if wondering whether siding with Eli meant cutting themselves off from her forever. Eli watched quiet, his small fingers curled against the table. His eyes darted from face to face, measuring who chose him and who didn't. For once, the silence didn't shrink him. It gave him power.